B in Clarksville asked about the most famous junior. Is it Ken Griffey? Probably. I'd say he and Cal Ripken are probably the more famous baseball juniors of the time being. Of course, Ken Griffey Jr. and Sr. played as teammates. Cal Ripken Sr. managed Cal Ripken Jr. with the Orioles, which I think might be maybe a little more difficult than being a teammate with their son. Clay Henry joining us from Hogs Illustrated. Read them all at Whole Hog Sports as well. Clay, could you think of any other? Well, let me separate. What do you think would be tougher, to be the dad who is managing your son as Cal Ripken Sr., or to be the dad who is playing with your son and hoping he doesn't completely upstage you like Ken Griffey Sr.?
Yeah, I mean, you figure the Griffeys were probably comfortable in their own skin because they were both so good. And, to play as long as Ken Griffey Sr. played, I don't think it bothered him. And it probably was a delight to be able to, to play side by side. Mm-hmm. But that's about the most unique of all that they would be playing together. I guess for just a short time, though, right?
Yeah. You do remember, too, that, 1988, the Orioles were so awful to start the season that Cal Ripken Sr. was fired, 6 or 7 games into the season, and yet both of his sons, Cal Jr. and Billy, were on that 88 team, which had to be so awkward for them, but I'm sure they understood why. Who do you think would be at the top of the list for, we could say most famous Razorback Jr., or maybe we could separate that to most famous and best Razorback juniors.
It's interesting because we may not know the juniors, because seldom, if your dad wasn't a Razorback, there would be no need in the separation, and calling. I always thought it was interesting, Raleigh Williams III, but we didn't really know Raleigh Williams Jr. or Sr. other than that Raleigh Williams III wanted to make sure that was on his jersey. So if Raleigh Williams Jr. had played for the Razorbacks, then you really have that. You need to denote that there are different, but it's obviously Billy Ray Sr., Billy Ray Jr. both played in the NFL. Were both great Razorbacks, and they're both in the Arkansas Sports Hall of Fame. So they kind of stand alone in this deal. You've got something kind of in the works that you don't know how it's going to turn out yet. It's too early, but John Daly and Little John Daly Jr. is he'll enroll in the fall. He's signed and will be a really great prospect, but you don't know if he's even going to make the lineup because their team is really good. They almost won the SEC this past weekend. Yeah, I guess you would say back-to-back SEC championships because they won it the year before the COVID wiped out. So they almost were back-to-back.
I think a lot of people forget that Houston Nutt was a junior, because Dale Nutt Sr. is one of the all-time great high school coaches, right? Yeah, and he played at Oklahoma State basketball, and I think maybe basketball and football. But Houston Jr. wasn't really a great Razorback player. His notoriety is more, as a coach than a player, because he left and transferred to Oklahoma State because he wasn't going to play either in football or basketball at Arkansas. What was the attitude about transfers then, Clay? Because now it's so commonplace. You'll run out of room to remember who's transferring each day. So it's not just accepted now; it's expected. What was the mindset on transfers in the day when Houston Nutt did that?
Yeah, you've got two kinds of transfers. You got those that can't get on the field, and you just wish them well, right? Then you got those that are playing, and when they leave, then you're a little bit kind of perturbed or peeved or whatever. Ty Story you didn't really blame because they were bringing in guys that they were sure were going to beat him out. So I don't think there was really much consternation when he left, just disbelief when he played so well at Western Kentucky and just rubbed your nose in it. But I think, everybody will consider him a good Razorback. But Mike Woods, that's a whole different ball game. There's a guy that's at the peak of his game. It looks like the team is on the rise. You've got 10 seniors that choose to come back and play for these coaches. And then you've got another senior rising senior who says, no, I'm going to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does make you scratch your head, that's for sure. But we've been through that quite a bit. and Brandon in Paris asked if you just gave folks permission to be perturbed at Mike Woods.
Well, no, I'm just saying some are. I'm not saying I don't. Everybody's got to decide what they want to do, but I know there are some.
Mm-hmm. You saw where the two defensive linemen now have transferred into Arkansas. You got Utsi, who played at Mizzou and is from Parkview, and a guy that's had 3 years or so in the SEC, and not a ton of production, but somebody that looks like he definitely adds to the depth. Yeah. He adds to the depth. I'm interested on this guy that they got out of Illinois State, because it seems he might be, according to a couple of other scouting services, say that he might actually be able to produce and maybe start immediately.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. I mean, you don't bring them if you don't think they're going to play. So, they might be in the portal and volunteering to come, but you check out their film because that's the last thing. It's kind of like a junior college player. If you don't think they can start, don't sign them. Don't sign them for depth. I think that both of these guys will be in the rotation, contribute. And, one of them is can kind of play on the edge. The other one looks like the Illinois State guy looks like he probably going to play in the middle. But they needed depth, they need size, they need experience, and that's if there was some place that they really I thought needed help, even with losing Mike Woods, I was going to say the defensive line, and that looks like they've done it. They've filled those needs, and that's what it's all about.
And I'm intrigued also by Jalen Williams, the JUCO.
He's a good player.
Jones College. You think so?
Oh yeah, I've watched him in 3 scrimmages, and is he gonna be Jonathan Marshall and rage in the middle? No, but he'll hold his spot and be an anchor. He'll be a good player, and you'll get 30 or 40 snaps out of him.
Okay. I want to transition into baseball, and I'm going to love that article you wrote about the Bible study that Coach D has with a couple of the former Razorback players and Coach Jorn and their reactions to Kevin Kopps. I just thought that was brilliant because, we forget Kevin has had 3 pitching coaches in his time in Arkansas, and all 3 of them I know are rooting for him hard.
You got it, and just because of how hard he worked, you got to realize he's a 3-time captain, and he's a 6-year. He's a 6th-year player that's got another year if he wants it. I mean, it's just I don't think he'll take another year. He needs to, cash his chips after this year. I don't think he has any leverage though. As a 23-year-old, they're just like, hey, this is what we're going to give you, and this is how it is. I mean, I may be stunned, but a 23-year-old that has Tommy John scar is, he's going to be a high risk when you think about the draft. But, Phil, if he gives you 6 more weeks of what we've seen in the last month, who knows? I mean, he might jump up into the, 5th or 6th round. That's about as high as I see him going with like I say, the age and the Tommy John scar.
Yeah, and I don't even know if they've announced how many rounds they're going to be, but one thing
Jorn said 20.
20 is what I thought, yeah. But look, I mean, you can talk about velocity, you can talk about spin rate, all that kind of stuff. When you watch, and I know we're coming up against the break here, when you watch the number of swings and misses he gets, I don't care about what the pitch is. The number of swings and misses means he's fooling really, really good hitters in the SEC weekend after weekend. I think scouts may pay attention to that as well, but you're right. I mean, at 23, if you do have the 1 year to come back, it is leverage-ish. But at 24, it's like, now you're starting to run out of career time. So
you've got to polish up on your little swing and a miss because you've used it a lot with Kopps.
I've used it a ton with him. And I plan on using it a lot more for hopefully another 2 months. All right, we'll be back with More with Clay Henry right after the break on Halftime. Stay with us. Here's another one of my favorite juniors, and he's a great blues rock and roller. Gary Clark Jr. is one of my favorite ones right now. I really do like him. We got Clay Henry with us for another segment. Clay, with the Razorback baseball team heading into the Tigers' den. And I don't care, how bad LSU has been at times this year. By the way, they've won their last 2 series, so they're starting to figure things out a little bit. But even the great Razorback baseball teams have found it almost impossible to win in Baton Rouge. And maybe some of it is timing because you go there every other year. So the last time that LSU missed the baseball tournament was 2011, and the Hogs swept LSU in Fayetteville that season. But they've only won 1 series there. That was 2004. They've been traveling there to Baton Rouge since 1963. This the first series I see they played their course in the SEC since 92. So, and LSU's won the last 2 series, so I'm allowed to be nervous just because of that, right? And Ty Richardson is showing up. That's enough.
Yeah, everybody plays better at home. And, somebody – I was talking to a friend, and he's like, I don't understand why, everybody does so much better at home in baseball. I said, well, the last at bat goes to the home team. And if you don't think that's an advantage, it is a huge advantage. It's the only sport where there really is a true home field advantage. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we forget about that. And it's to be able to bat last and to know how many runs that you need, or if you're playing for a win or not. The visiting team just doesn't have that luxury. You just don't know. And, you see all these comebacks that Arkansas's made at home, and I think that's part of it. But LSU's been so good. They're the benchmark. I mean, they're like Texas football was for Arkansas in the Southwest Conference. And I know there are some Arkansas fans that are lukewarm excited about this team because they know they still got to go to LSU. Now, you can do poorly at LSU and still win the league, the rest of the way. But this is a weekend where I think they can really stamp themselves as the number 1 team in the country, the number 1 team in the SEC, and all that other good stuff. But this is not vintage LSU, but they're rounding into form. They got some guys back, right? And it won't be easy. Home team bats last.
They hit home run. Look, they hit home runs. They've got a couple of pitchers that have been doing really well of late.
Better.
Part of the reason that they fell apart in the middle of the season was they lost their Friday night ace, Jaden Hill, who I think they were counting on big time. But Landon Marceau and A.J. Labus have been pitching really well of late. And so now, to change that into Arkansas starting pitching, Clay, the bullpen has been the main strength for a while now.
Correct.
We had Matt Hobbs on the show yesterday. There isn't a single Arkansas pitcher that has been overworked as far as starters are concerned. So I don't think you have to worry about a Patrick Wicklander, a Peyton Paulette getting tired or weary. Only 3 times has an Arkansas starter thrown over 90 pitches. That's it. And I feel like, Dave openly talks about, I'm getting you ready for May, I'm getting you ready for June. That's what they've done. And I feel like Wicklander and Paulette, Clay, I think they're ready to really take off. I think it's not just this weekend because the last 2 weeks they've looked good. Both of these guys are ready for the spotlight.
Yeah, I can remember a few years ago, both with Isaiah Campbell and Blaine Knight, when they got upset that they were coming out in the 5th or 6th inning, and they've got a big lead. And they said, Coach, I've got a couple more. He says, you save those couple of more for June. Right. So that's when we want you to be fresh and ready to go. And that's he has a good eye for that. And there's a lot of people that, if you say, well, what's Dave Van Horn's one fault? He said he's got a quick hook, with starting pitcher. But it's all in the plan. It's not, he now you walk a couple, you're going to come out. He does not like walks. But he's going to save arms. Not going to throw a bunch of pitches in April. That just maybe in May and June you start to throw a few more. Back to the bullpen, part of what LSU's got going is they got a guy that seems like he can give them one outing a weekend, and that's Fontenot. Mm-hmm. And he did that at Ole Miss, but they didn't want to bring him back in Sunday, and you saw what happened.
Yeah.
So I just wonder at some point, do they bring him back a second time, like what you see other teams do with their best relief guy, like Kopps, and I saw Ole Miss try to do that with Broadway. Didn't quite work though, did it?
No, it didn't. And Kopps is a different sort of a guy in his ability to bounce back like that and still be just as effective the second day as he is the first day, which really is amazing. And so that would lead to my next question here, because I feel like game 1, game 2 of the weekend, you've got it figured out as far as your starters are concerned. And I think Dave is announcing the rotation for LSU any moment now. Sunday is the question mark.
Lockhart,
Lockhart, I still think, I don't know if he's the answer, but I think he's the answer they want.
Yeah, you want to have like having those left-handers to start with, and have people set their lineup, and then you bring the right-handers in, and it's like then they got to decide if they want to change their lineups, and usually you don't much. I wonder if Vermillion at some point could be back in the starting rotation. He was rusty last week, and then you got, are we going to see Connor Nolan, this weekend? I guess if you're either way behind or way ahead, that might be the opportunity, right?
Potentially, yes, because they're going with a lead on Friday. If it's the 6th inning, you know who they're going to. There's no question about it. It's going to be Kevin Kopps. But let's say that Wicklander blows up a little bit early on Friday. At that point, maybe you do end up going with a Connor Nolan, because it's not a matter that he hasn't thrown of late. He pitched to his own hitters yesterday, so he faced the best lineup in the country yesterday, and he looked fine. They hit him around a little bit, but you know what? They hit a lot of guys around.
They do.
I think he'd be ready to go on. They hit everybody around, Clay. I mean, this lineup is really starting to remind me of 2018. It is the depth 1 through 9.
Oh yeah.
No real holes in the land. I feel like they're less reliant on the home run than that team was.
Hey, I got it. I just thought of another junior.
Who?
My dad was a junior.
Oh,
he
didn't
was
go with a third though. Would you have wanted to be Orville the third?
Well, my older brother is, and he was dubbed by the midwife who birthed him as Butch, and that stuck. And so he never was Orville Henry III, even though that's his real name. He's Butch. And I think in some professional situations, Orville Henry showed up, in some but he was Butch to us. Everybody, his closest friends, they all knew him as Butch.
Hey, Clay, I want to keep the conversation on Orville for a quick moment here, because in a couple of weeks, Arkansas and Arkansas State play baseball at Boehm Walker. You've got Arkansas State on the 2024 football schedule. I think I saw earlier today, I don't know if it's officially announced, but it's going to happen. Arkansas women's basketball plays in Jonesboro this next season. What would Orville Henry think if he was alive today, and what would he say about that?
Well, I think what he would say is things change, because I've heard him say that to me about certain situations, and he had two favorite sayings when I would ask him for advice, and he would say, well, things change and you need to consider that, or that's really dicey. When I started Hogs Illustrated, he goes, you're leaving a good job. That looks dicey to me, but go try it. But I almost went to Arkansas State. Their journalism school, I thought at that time, was a lot better than Arkansas's, and considered it. And my dad thought, and I found a letter from Andy Morris, who was assistant athletic director in SID, to my dad, begging him to let me come, because he thought he would be the one making the decision. And my dad says, go do it. Looks great to me. And then I talked to my mother, and she said, you will not go to that school. That was the end of it. That was the end of it.
And she got the last word. I got to tell you,
it was that was the end of the conversation. I didn't bring it up ever again.
But Clay, that advice
that
from Orville, that advice from Orville is, I think, the best advice that you could get from anybody. And I'm not saying that work hard, treat people nicely, and all of that isn't great advice. The best advice you can get is the world changes, whether you want it to or not. You adapt or you die. And boy, that's how I try to live.
Yeah, I think that's right. And he had friends in Jonesboro that, you may not believe that, but, he went up there and did some feature stories when Larry Lacewell was the head coach. He went up and spent some time, thought it was great.